gentlemen, please join me in welcoming your host, Elizabeth Brent.
Hi, kids. How's everyone doing? Good. Drinking, I can see that. Guys, welcome to the cooking show. I am your host, Liz Bramwell. Okay? Very special show for you this evening. Very simple, very easy, all things that you can do at home. And let's say you were to have a dinner party, maybe a couple of things you could do a day or two in advance. Right? And then your entree this evening is a semi-boneless Cornish Game Hen. On the bottom of the plate is an extra sharp cheddar fondue, some roasted fingerling potatoes, as well as heirloom baby carrots. And I'll show you how to make the garden herb and lemon butter that we're going to rub underneath the skin. All right, so I have a pound of butter here that sat out at room temperature for quite some time. You do want it to be relatively soft. If you don't have the time, to allow it to sit out at room temperature, by all means throw it in the microwave, but don't melt it to death. Once you start to melt it and separate the fat and the milk solids, you're kind of lost at that point, right? But what I do encourage is if you know you're gonna make it later on in the day, just pull the butter out of the fridge in the morning, leave it on the counter when you come back at night. No, it's not gonna be spoiled. There's plenty of fat and plenty of salt. It'll be fine for like a month. I have about a quarter cup of wildflower honey here. I really just wanna put in about two tablespoons. Okay. Feel free if you have that cute little bear in the cupboard, or that honey that you bought in like 1989 for that one time you had a cold. Tea with lemon and honey, it fixes everything still. All right, just kidding. I have some minced garlic here. We'll do two teaspoons of chopped garlic. This is just raw garlic. So I have a lemon here, and I actually have this funny nutmeg zester that I love to find excuses to use for. How many of you have a zester at home? It's like the best $6 investment you could ever make, whether it's for cheese or anything else. So this one is a nutmeg zester, but I think it's cute, and it was $4. So I'm using it with a lemon. Works out really nicely. All right, so zest of 1 lemon. This is super exciting. All right, that's enough. So let's start folding at least these ingredients together before we get into the herbs, right? The exciting part. So let's put this down on the side. Talk a little bit about herbs. Okay. So let's just go through them. Shout out an answer. Oregano. Perfect, you guys are so great. So now that we all know, oh, Kathy clapped. All right, let's have a cheers for you guys. Everybody raise your glasses. Cheers. All right, so we obviously don't need all of this. The ratio that I'm going to use to 1 pound of butter is about a quarter cup of chopped herbs. So let's just get rid of this oregano, right? Chop this up. If you didn't have oregano, or let's say you grew marjoram, you could absolutely use that. Now, one chop through kind of both ways is fine. I'm going to leave them relatively hearty, right? I know, right? It's another thing. I learned how to pluck the herbs. So I'm just going to chop everything up. A little bit of chiffonade on the sage, only because I don't necessarily want to toss all the stems in. Those we can save right there. Rosemary is always the bane of my existence. Always. Because it's just such a pain to cut. And the more you chop it, the browner it gets. It's one of those herbs that gets really, really brown really quickly. So it just always looks terrible unless you actually leave it on the stem. So let's see. Since we are cooking this, it should be fine. Right. A little more. Bane of my existence, every time. If you didn't want to do rosemary, you could totally pick another herb, I understand. I like to torture myself, apparently. Put rosemary in it. All right, there's a few whole ones in there. We'll be all right. Here's some rosemary. All right, a little bit of chive. And then We mix it all together. All right, so guys, butter is done. How many of you love to eat butter? Does anyone have a creepy butter story?
I'm gonna go with no.
Sure, Matt.
Yeah, so
Creepy butter story.
I used to like eating butter as a kid, the full sticks, and I used to like to pour syrup on top for a nice dessert. They just used to eat them whole.
That's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
Where are you from?
Hang them.
Okay, I used to take quarter-pound sticks of butter and roll them in sugar and eat them.
Nice.
But yours is like natural sugar, mine is processed sugar, but we're on the same boat right there. I'm gonna cut up some of these adorable little carrots. These are little baby carrots. And I have orange, yellow, purple. Okay.
Where do you buy those purple carrots?
So it's really funny because, well, I buy them from my produce purveyor. So I get them from one of two companies. They sell them in what they call like a tricolor pack. So they come purple, yellow, and orange. And of course, you know, one of the first things that I did, I'm like, how do they actually make them purple? Because if I'm gonna be in here and dealing with a purple carrot, I do wanna be able to tell you how they ended up purple. The first carrots, they say, ever, carrots were originally purple and white. And the orange carrot wasn't even developed until the late 1500s, early 1600s, which I thought was very funny. And it actually just has to do with the cultivars and simple genetic differences. I always, you know, you always want to hear like some horror story about a vegetable that doesn't look right, but the one that doesn't look right is actually the orange carrot. And they were genetically modified so that they're full of nutrients, like excessively full of nutrients. They have that orange color, and the health benefits are better for us. Strange, right? The one thing that we think is the most normal thing on the shelf is actually the most tampered with. All right, so my baby carrots are done. Olive oil, salt, pepper, very simply done. I usually like to roast them at a really high temperature. Who doesn't love a tiny potato? I'm using fingerlings, thin skin, yellow flesh. Very easy to work with, right? They're very easy to work with. They are adorable. They're tiny potatoes. Does anyone in here not love the tiny potato? See, everyone loves them. Let's have a cheers. Cheers to tiny potatoes. Fingerlings are nice potatoes. They're one of those root vegetables that even though the skin is so thin and the flesh on the inside tends to be mealy if you involve too much water, when you roast them, they still have like a pop to them. When you break through the skin of a fingerling, even if it's cut like this after it's roasted, it still has crunch, it still has a pop. It's actually, they're nice potatoes. I like working with them. And then of course they have the cute little peewees and all like 17 of the colors that they come in, because Steven is obsessed with color. Loves purple potatoes, can you not tell? He's wearing a purple shirt. He's representing. So again, a little olive oil, salt and pepper. With the potatoes, I would encourage pretty much any herb under the sun, right? It's a potato. With the carrots, I would encourage really only 2 herbs, sage or thyme. I find that those are the 2 herbs that benefit the carrot the most, considering how sweet they can get once you roast them. Okay. I'm gonna roast these at the same temperature for about the same time. Why would they kind of cook at the same rate, even though they're 2 different vegetables, same temperature, same time?
Density.
Close. The water content. Right? So the water content in a potato is actually higher than it is in a carrot. So even though the carrots are thinner, smaller, the potatoes are a little bit larger, they'll kind of cook at the same rate, right? All right, so these are going in, like I said, 450 convection. 450 degrees convection. If you don't have convection, increase the temperature by 25 degrees. So if you're doing it home in a conventional oven, 475 is a good temperature for you guys. I always encourage a 10-minute check for vegetables. This is my bird. All right, so for those of you who kind of forgot what it looks like. This is what it looks like in the package when you buy it at the grocery store with its rib cage, all right? This is what it looks like without. So it's missing its wingettes, and it's also missing its thigh bone. The drumstick is here, and basically the elbow to shoulder is also intact, right? You have your two little tenderloins right here, which you may not be able to see, but I'll put my fingers under them. You have your two little tenderloins right here, which are delicious. Don't worry about overcooking them because this bird is not a long-term in the oven bird. But one of the things that I encourage you to do if you're going to be buying something that's already partially deboned is go through and kind of feel the protein for bone shards. All right, it does happen. Nobody's perfect. The last thing that you want to do is have a lovely dinner party and have Nick like choking at the end of the table because you just didn't feel like touching the meat. So we have a couple of bone shards here that I am going to get rid of. The bird itself is pretty much ready to go. Right? If you decide to buy it whole, you can absolutely do the exact same thing by pushing your hand beneath the muscle, like up into the skin. It's actually a little bit easier when the rib cage is in there, right? So I usually just like to go through. This is usually when most people just don't like to know where their food comes from.
What's the portion size right there?
Right here, all right, so normally Cornish Game Hen is no larger than 2 pounds. Once you're removing the rib cage, it's about 3/4 of a pound. So you have about 1.25 pounds to 1.5 pounds worth of protein here. Bone and everything. For one person, it's really a perfect portion. I mean, these birds were bred to be a single portion for someone. It's a tiny chicken. Yeah, it's not a game bird. Even though they call it a Cornish Game Hen, first of all, it's not necessarily a girl. It could be a boy or a girl. And it's also not a game bird. It's a tiny chicken. The flesh on this bird is a little darker than chicken, only because of its age, because it's younger. It hasn't had enough time to mature. Whereas veal's flesh is a lot lighter. It's like pork instead. So I'm gonna set a little bit of butter aside because I want, don't be sad, because I want to make sure that I have, this is where food gets good. This is why your food in a restaurant tastes good. All right, so what I'm doing is I'm lifting the skin, applying the herb butter directly to the opposite side of the chicken breast. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna cut a little apple to go into the base of my roasting dish to kind of just keep the hen off of the bottom. Not to say that it wouldn't be beneficial for it to sit directly on the bottom, but I don't want it to cook too fast, right? Since it is a young animal and it has eaten a lot, doesn't necessarily mean that it's developed a lot of fat.
Does the kind of apple matter?
No, I'm just using what I have in the fridge. You don't even have to use an apple. But, I mean, apples soaked in Cornish Game Hen juice is like not the worst thing that's ever happened. I've just kind of tucked this under slightly. Oh, it looks like it's swimming. You want the skin side to be as close to the element as possible so you get that nice, delicious, crispy skin. In my oven, the heating element is on the top. So it'll brown better on the top. So, Game Hen's in. This is going to be my sharp cheddar fondue. So a little bit of onion in here, and I'm gonna add 1/4 pound of butter. So for all of you who buy that pound in the grocery store, it's 1 stick. All right, so I had 1/4 of a Spanish onion, very small dice. It wasn't quite a mince, although it could be, right? So you don't want big chunks of things floating around in your fondue, although people would probably mistake it for cheese and you might be okay. And then I have a 1/2 cup of flour, all purpose. not sifted, but I'm tossing it through my whisk. For something like this, you're gonna cook it. You don't really need to sift it. When you sift flour, it's really for baking purposes only. All right, so what I'm doing here is I'm creating a blonde roux. I have 3 cups of heavy cream, 1 cup of water. I just turned this on high because I do want it to come up in a timely manner.
Just turn it up high, kind of rush the flavor.
It won't rush the flavor. What it's gonna do is I just have to be a little more mindful of the dairy because you don't want the dairy to burn. But the flour is gonna cook out really at the same rate as long as you are mindful of it. This is gonna thicken just slightly because of the roux that I created in the base, but I think at this point we can probably season just a little bit. Salt and pepper. You wanna leave the majority of the major seasoning at the very end, right? Because you wanna be able to control. My bird. Bird is a word. Close that for a second. The potatoes and carrots look good. Brush. And my butter. So far, this has been in the oven 10 minutes. So we're at 10. I'm gonna let it go for another 5. And you can always tell, like I'll be able to flip it over and I'll be able to see. All right, so that's that. I'm setting it for another 5 minutes. My carrots and fingerlings both look really good right now. Everything over there is done. I just want to add my cheese. For those of you who can see this, my heavy cream and water has thickened into a beautiful bechamel. So I'm just gonna start by adding, By the way, guys, very quickly, before I added the cheese, I did take it off the heat. So I just added 1.5 lemons. This is gonna add kind of that different aspect to the cheese. So it's still rich, it still tastes really good. However, it's gonna add a contrast, right? And then I have sour cream. A cup of sour cream. This is going to make the fondue feel light when it's not. It's like using Cool Whip instead of whipped cream. All right, so whipping in these 2 ingredients, this is done. All right, so in this pan over here, I am gonna start making a very simple glacé for the top of my bird, right? So I have chicken stock here. I have my burner on high. I'm gonna reduce this by about 3/4, and then we're gonna finish it with butter. Thank you. I have a little bit of glacé, which I literally took my chicken stock, about 3/4 of a cup, reduced it down to a little bit less than 1/4 of a cup, exactly. We're just gonna leave that. All right, so bird's done. Veggies are done. So I'm gonna let that sizzle in the back for a second, and I'm gonna start plating up while you guys are eating. So fondue on the bottom. And then potatoes on top of that. I have my fingerlings, which I'm just gonna kind of build a little base on the bottom. I'm gonna take my carrots. How is dinner, by the way, everyone? Good. All right, the fondue is delicious. It's my favorite part of every meal. So if you're dealing with a semi-boneless game hen, the best way to check and make sure if it's cooked is flip it over, because you can still see on the inside, right? So then a little bit of my glacé. Just a little over the top. And then a little bit of microgreens over the top, kind of like a Miss America sash. So, what do you guys think? Much better.